What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston, live for the Auerbach Center. I saw some complaints about being late. I apologize. I was just getting everything set up. Brad just finished speaking not too long ago. We were just kind of doing all of the post work that comes out of that. For those of you that watched the press conference, I'm sure you have your own opinions. You can watch the full press conference on CLNS Media. For those of you that did not watch it and just kind of want to hear the takeaways, you are also more than welcome to join. I'm going to be taking live questions in the chat throughout this session, so feel free to drop any questions in. I'll be answering them. Going to be doing this a lot throughout the summer, probably mostly in reaction to breaking news, of which I think there will be a lot because, as everybody knows, this is a very uncertain offseason, certainly a lot more uncertain than last year's was, and I think there's a lot of different directions that things could go. So, there's a couple different topics that I'm going to touch on just based off of what Brad just said. But I will just say off the top, the first thing he said when he sat down was, I don't really want to talk about the future too much. And he's going to be talking to us again the night of the draft. And so over the next few weeks, we'll hear from him again, and we'll probably get into a little bit more specifics. But when you really think about it, like, what advantage does he have to share much, right? Because ultimately, like, that's a competitive edge that any general manager is going to want to hold to their chest. So I'll just say my biggest takeaways from hearing him talk today is, he talked about Jaylen Brown's knee, which I know was obviously a big story that came out this week with the report that he has a partial tear in his meniscus. And so that's one thing that he said, I think that is just a big takeaway. He said that, the knee is in a good place structurally, which is something that Jaylen said as well before the Knicks series. It's a little bit confusing to me because if you have a torn meniscus, that seems like structural damage, but I think what that indicates is that, generally speaking, his knee's in a pretty good place, and there might be a minor tear or something like that. And so we don't have clarity for sure if the surgery is on or off the table, but this does not sound like something particularly substantial or concerning. The direct quote he said is, as he even said a couple weeks ago, the knee's in a good place. Structurally, I think he felt comfortable getting out there and going after it, and hopefully he'll feel better after being off of it for a couple of weeks. The unfortunate part is we're done in the middle of May, but some of these guys have some nicks, bruises, and other things like that. And then he also said that he's known for a long time. He said it's been stable and he's played with it. That's been several scans through and through. We've known that for a long time, and he's known that for a long time. So he was kind of diminishing the significance of the report that came out on Saturday around Jaylen's knee and the torn meniscus and kind of all of that. Again, it's obviously in his interest to say that, whether he's going to trade Jaylen or shop him around or whatnot. Like, there's no reason to want to make his knee situation sound serious. But I also don't think that it is particularly serious based off the fact that he did play through it. He played through it at a pretty high level. And he said it himself. He's feeling better. Brad said that he told him at the end of the Knicks series that he's feeling better. So that is the first thing I'll just say off the top around Jaylen's knee, a topic that he touched on, and a topic that I think is pretty pertinent here, just considering all the injuries and thinking about next season. And is Jaylen going to be compromised? Obviously, Tatum is expected to miss most, if not all, of the season, and all of that. So that's the first thing. I asked Brad about his confidence level in Jaylen to keep Tatum afloat, and just kind of to keep the Celtics afloat with Tatum, being sidelined. And I'll read the exact quote of what he said, and I'll kind of say my interpretation of it. When I asked that question, when you ask questions like that, like, what's your confidence level? Like, the person's not going to say, I have no confidence level in Jaylen. So it's more about, like, how resounding is that message that Brad is willing to communicate, right? This is what he said. He said, first of all, I know we always talk in terms of superstars and don't talk in terms of necessarily the other 13 players, right? The reality is we have a ton of good players and everyone leans on everyone. That said, Jaylen and Jayson have gotten the majority of attention because of how good they are. And I have full faith that any game that you have those guys on the floor or one of those guys on the court, you have a great shot. And so I have full faith in Jaylen. So 3 things out of that I took away. One, he's not putting it all on Jaylen. And I think that if he was going to say, like, we think that he has another massive leap that he's going to make and the next year he's going to show everybody, like, that's not what he said. I think that he wants to make clear that next year is about everybody equally, or, obviously a little bit more on the better players, but that it's not going to be a one-man effort to replace Tatum and to keep this team afloat. The other thing is that he touched on something that I feel really strongly about, and that's that Tatum and Brown have been the key to this era's success, and that Some people view this era as more successful than others. I personally think that making, 6 conference finals and making the finals twice and winning a championship, that is like pretty much incredibly successful. And obviously you want to win more than one championship, and that still remains the goal. But they have been the common thread through the winning. So I agree with that, and I think that ultimately, if they do want to field a competitive team next year, that's going to be the best position. That's the best. It's going to be the best thing they can do to position themselves is to keep him around and to keep Tatum around when he returns. And again, I think that a lot of people feel. I just finished watching Celtics City last night, and I was watching the 1987 episode and kind of all the guys getting down. And there is a feeling that was a little bit reminiscent of what we're seeing right now, except for the fact that these guys are still in their prime. Like, these guys are 27 and 26. And so at the end of the day, like, yes, they're going through injuries, but there's no reason to think this is like the beginning of their downfall or the beginning of the end. Could be wrong, right? Meniscus injury could ultimately alter you in the future, or an Achilles injury could. But right now, I just don't have any information that pushes me in that direction. So I continue to think they're going to keep him. I know we've had some heated discussions on it. You can watch. I was debating this with Bobby Manning and John Danis on our Garden Report show the other night. You can watch that in full. I'm not going to do too much about that today, but just wanted to. That was one of the topics that I was interested in, just kind of getting a temperature check from him about. And I still believe that he's going to be a big part of their future plans. That being said, I do think that everybody's going to be shopped around. There's going to be offers. There's going to be just gauging players' market values and all of that. And I know the fan base has been pretty divided on him. You can just even read the chat right now, and you can read the comment section right now. And there's certainly people that would love to trade him and people that would love nothing less. So, and that's kind of been the reality throughout his tenure here in Boston. And I think it continues to be his reality. So not anything particularly new there. So I'm going to start going through some questions. I guess the other just player-specific takeaway that I think people have been obviously interested in and concerned about is Kristaps Porzingis and just what is going on with him, what happened to him, why was he struggling so much in the second round. I didn't think Brad was going to tell us anything that Porzingis himself didn't say, because Porzingis is probably the most open player with the media of any player on this team. And Porzingis himself said, we don't know exactly what it is, but I was clear to play. There was no heart issue. And honestly, watching, not to keep bringing up Celtics history, but I did watch 4 hours of Celtics City last night, watching the whole Reggie Lewis situation and hearts and all that. It certainly makes you just make sure that everybody's going to be fully cleared when they play. And I think Porzingis wasn't doing anything dangerous. But what Brad said is the way it was described to me was just post-viral syndrome, which just has lingering effects of a long illness. He said he didn't feel good in the Knicks series, but before that he felt great. And so, when you play every other day, it's not an ideal situation to feeling better, especially with the travel and everything else and the amount of physical force these guys put on their bodies. So our expectation is that probably within the next few weeks will be good for him to be off. So I think, first of all, again, I'll disclaim, Brad has no reason to say anything around Porzingis' illness being serious, because he's probably gauging his trade value as well. But he also didn't offer any new information, no new diagnosis, no new term. I didn't think that he would, because I genuinely don't think there's a condition out there that they're sitting on that they won't share with the media. Nothing has indicated that to me. I think that they've just accepted that this is just lingering effects from a virus that really impacted him. Whether they just haven't gotten a diagnosis. I mean, there are thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world that are kind of wondering what they have and don't feel great and spend months, if not years, trying to figure that out. So that's a thing, right? Chronic illnesses and fatigue and all of that. So it's possible that that's what he's been dealing with. It's also possible that he'll be fine in a month, and really it was just hard for his body to get through it, considering you are playing in playoff games, right? So I know there's been a lot of crazy rumors around what does KP have and different things. I don't think that it's going to be some big bombshell this is the disease that he's had this whole time and they've been hiding it. I think that it really might just be one of those things, long COVID, potentially, something of the like. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to try to speculate too much. He is playing in Latvia this summer, which I'm sure some fans will be annoyed by because you don't want him to get hurt. But at the same time, I think it's probably a good thing, because you can gauge if he's able to be impactful. If he is impactful in Latvia, that is a good sign. If not for the Celtics, then for his trade value. I can't imagine that many general managers are feeling too excited about the prospect of trading for him right now, considering that he basically has not been a major factor in 2 consecutive playoff runs, despite being a good regular season player, but only played in 6 games in the first year, had some great moments, will never take away from what he did in game 1 of the finals. Was honestly probably the most magical stretch of basketball I've ever seen in person. So hugely impactful, always going to be a part of that championship run. But again, he didn't play in most of that postseason. And then right now, this last postseason, he played in all the games, but he obviously struggled quite a bit. So I think that's going to be a challenging player to trade. And so there actually might be, like, even though I think he's the person that most fans right now are expecting to trade, like most fans are probably thinking the Porzingis trade announcement is going to come any day now. I think the reality with trades is that it's the guys that get traded are the guys that have a higher value, right? Like, you want to trade a guy when they're at their highest value, not at their lowest. And if you go back to like Marcus Smart and Malcolm Brogdon and Rob Williams, those guys were traded before their value really dipped. And then obviously we saw that they weren't able to stay on the floor, all three of those guys. And so Porzingis is kind of in that category where he's already shown he's not staying on the floor. And so there might be some benefit to actually keeping him around in the fall, recouping his trade value. Like, I'm seeing somebody here saying that in the chat exactly. And all of that. So again, I don't know if we'll see him again or not. When I was talking to him in the locker room after game 6, I asked him how he would characterize this tenure. He said, really, he kind of pointed to the championship as the ultimate success. Also acknowledged there have been a lot of personal struggles for him with staying healthy. He's dealt with so many injuries, the calf, the torn ligament in his leg that kept him out of this fall. And then obviously I think the illness was very, very frustrating for him. And so I have no idea if we're going to see him again. I'm pretty 50-50 on it, but I think that he's certainly somebody that I've seen in conversations because it hasn't worked out great. One thing I have been thinking about is without Tatum next year, if you do want to field as competitive a team as possible, he becomes more important because I don't think that him, Tatum, and Brown were ever as a trio like hugely great this season. I think sometimes it feels like there were too many cooks in the kitchen, too many guys that demanded the ball. That's why when Al or Luke were out there, that unit's plus minus was better because those guys are more connector pieces. But maybe without Tatum, you need that additional score. And I know people aren't feeling particularly high about him right now because he wasn't able to do anything really in the postseason. But at the same time, he averaged 19.5 points per game on 49% shooting in the season. So, it's kind of hard to gauge like which version of him you're going to see next year. So that's what Brad said about Kristaps. Any questions about the CBA, about trades, about like contending next year versus taking a step back, he really kind of dodged. Didn't talk about Horford or Luke, which was a bummer. I was kind of joking afterwards. Sometimes there's so many reporters, it's hard to, you don't know what everybody else is going to ask. So there were actually a couple things that I thought were unfortunately not touched. Like, I would have loved to hear his take on Horford, but every reporter usually gets just like one question, so it's a little bit tough in that sense. But he did say, as far as competing for a championship versus taking a step back, he said, "I never put a ceiling on a group of players. Some year you put a group of guys together that you think has a better chance than others, but we'll see how it all looks." And obviously, Brad's been around for a lot of conference finals teams. From the Isaiah years through now, and I think that he has seen that a lot of different kinds of rosters can have success. And the 2024 team is the one that everybody's going to remember most fondly. Like, that's the team that won the championship. I don't know that team was definitively the only one that could have won the championship, right? And this is like another thing that I debate with people all the time. Like, I think that there are other Celtics teams that could have won if a couple of things had gone differently. And it doesn't necessarily indicate that like the 2022 team was fraudulent and the 2025 team was fraudulent, but the 2024 team, like, that was a championship team. And I'm sure that logic doesn't resonate with everybody. I'm sure there are people in the chat that are like, that doesn't make any sense to me because one team won and the other ones didn't. But I think from a team building standpoint, like, Brad has said this many times over the years, you just want to be in the mix. You just want to be in the mix for our championship. That's the goal. And the Celtics have been in the mix for the better part of a decade. And so that's what, as a fan, for fans, that's what you want to give them. Like, I know fans get frustrated every year when they come up short, but ultimately you want to be in the mix and you want to be contending for a championship. And nothing that he said today made me think that next year he doesn't view them as being in that position. Obviously, without Jayson Tatum, they are in a very different spot than they would have been if he was healthy and they just got eliminated, and would be having a different conversation around team building. But he didn't make any indications around, like, we want to dump a bunch of players, we want to spend a year rebuilding or, a gap year or anything like that. Would he say that if he was 100% sure? Probably not. I also don't think that he's 100% sure because, like he said a couple of times, this all just happened a week ago, right? Like, game 4 was literally last Monday. Last Monday at this time, Tatum was warming up for game 4. And so everything has changed so quickly. And it's from an emotional standpoint, like for the people that are in charge of making decisions, he said they took a few days because they don't want to make any rash decisions or let their emotions kind of dictate what to do now. So him not saying much today is twofold. One, there's no reason to from a, just from a signaling standpoint, but then also I do think that this was not what they expected. Everything they thought about all year, all their considerations around what is this offseason going to look like, what kind of trades, what kind of moves, like all of that right now is a little bit out the window because this massive, massive development, and that's that your best player is probably going to miss all of next year. And so I think they're still processing that. They're probably figuring out what that means for them. And they're probably figuring out whether or not that indicates that they have to kind of overhaul everything. So quick message from our friends over at Prize Picks, and then I'll come back and answer some of your questions for the last part of this episode. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the core to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. The basketball playoffs are here and the action is heating up on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite spots. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Okay, so I'm going to start scrolling through questions here. And I guess just one, I'll just comment. I see a comment here about Tatum went from dropping one of his best playoff games to being post-surgery in under 24 hours. Like, honestly, one of the things that's crazy is it just makes you realize how quickly things change in general. Like, you could have your whole franchise plan centered around one guy's health. And even right now, right, like they're all planning on Tatum coming back and what that's going to mean. But as we've seen, anybody can go down at any moment. And I know Nico Harrison gets a lot of flack for the moves that he made, and they're still a little bit perplexing. But if Kyrie Irving stays healthy, like, who knows what happens with that team, right? So you just try to do as best as you can, and you try to hope that the guys that have historically been durable remain durable. And somebody like Tatum, somebody like Brown, like, they're as surefire as you can possibly have in this league. But that doesn't mean that you're, expecting any of this to happen. So, okay. Continuing to look through these questions here. Question from Jayson. Hey, Noah, how do you feel about a potential Trae Young acquisition, however that can pan out? I have mostly a lot of interest in a lot of players in the NBA. As probably people know, I'm pretty positive about most players. There are a short list of players that I would not want on the Celtics because I don't think that they necessarily impact winning basketball to the extent that you would want around the pieces that they currently have. And Trae Young, for me, is on that list. He's a big shot maker. I have respect for him in the clutch. I've seen him, take the Celtics to 6 in 23. So, like, I'm not saying that he is a bad player, but he's not somebody that I would want to see on the Celtics. I think he's a little too ball dominant. I don't think he's been particularly efficient in his career. And then defensively, a lot of what the NBA is right now is just hunting the weakest defenders. Like, that's kind of what the league has become about. I don't know if you guys have seen the discourse around weak link theory and how the NBA today is a lot more about who are your worst players rather than who is your superstar. Like, it used to be about whether you have 1 or 2 stars. Now it's more about who are the 5 guys you have on the floor, and is there a guy that you can go at, because everybody's hunting mismatches. And so to me, Trae Young is a classic example of a guy that effectively becomes your weak link on defense. And honestly, that's not something that they've had. Like, people talk about Peyton Pritchard as a potential weak link on defense, and he's not your starting center or starting point guard, but he's certainly not. He's not in that position. So I would be against that. But again, who knows? Who knows what he can turn into? He's still in the earlier part of his career. I've seen some stuff around him. I don't know where it came from or if there's like any substance to it. But yeah. Questions. This is a comment, but Jayson was asking. It says, I'd be willing to bet a decent sum of money that Tatum plays next year. I have no idea if Tatum's going to play. What I will say is that I reported last week, I had a conversation with an expert at UPenn who basically said that what Tatum did is unprecedented, that to be 27 and to be able to undergo surgery that quickly, it kind of puts him in a class of his own, as far as, like, you don't really know what the league, like, existing data points indicate for him. So it's possible that, you look at Kevin Durant and DeMarcus Cousins, and like that's all we have to draw from. Tatum might be in his own category because of just the nature of how quickly he had the surgery. Durant is the second quickest that I've come across, and even he took 2 days. And Brad Stevens actually talked about that today. He said we were at MSG, was 15 minutes away from Dr. O'Malley. They had their doctor on the phone, and we underwent MRI consultations and the surgery itself all before they had to put an injury report on for the next day. So we knew that, but it was interesting to hear from Brad's perspective, who was there at the scene and helped Tatum off the floor, and obviously said that this is going to be a difficult period for Tatum, and it already has been. And the fact that he's had to miss 2 games has already been hard for him. But I would not be surprised if he came back next year. I would say right now I'm pretty 50-50 on it, and that's not a medical opinion. That's just the range that I've heard from talking to doctors who are experts in the space is anywhere between 7 months to 15 months. So it's a broad range, and all the indicators point to Tatum being on the shorter end of that. But within a few months, they'll get a better sense of where he is in his recovery and whether it makes sense to even shoot for next season. So how will we transition into building through the draft like OKC when we have these older players and late draft picks? So what Will's asking is, I think, the crux of a lot of these debates around trading Jaylen, trading Derek, trading a lot of these really high value players. And that's, you're doing that if you're kind of accepting that you're heading into this next stage in this organization, and that's starting to acquire better draft picks and younger talent. So the question is whether the Celtics feel like they're at that point right now or not. They have young prospects. The one that I'm the most excited about is Baylor Sharman, who I think of the guys, the guys that weren't in the playoff rotation, he's the only one that I even considered. Like, could he be impactful right now? Is he ready for playoff minutes? I think next year, if this is a playoff team, Baylor Sharman's in that rotation. I think that he's in the regular season rotation. I'm pretty high on what he was able to do in March. Obviously, March basketball is March basketball. But if they get to the point where they're like, we can no longer be competitive and we can no longer field a contending roster, they are going to trade players that everybody in Boston loves. And they're going to trade players that have high value, that are at the peak of their value, to get those younger players and those draft picks and start that transition into, kind of team building for the future. So that's the debate, is are they at that point right now? I would say no, because of the fact that they still have 2 superstars that are in their athletic prime, despite the fact that those stars are dealing with, their first major injuries in their career. And obviously Tatum's is more serious than Brown's. But if you don't think you can field a competitive roster next year, and that's the conclusion that Brad and his front office teams reach over the next few weeks here, you might see a trade that would shock somebody. You might see Derek White get traded, or Jaylen Brown get traded, or any one of these guys that are beloved in Boston and have accomplished a lot, just to begin that process. And that's usually when trades happen, right? When guys have high value, not when they have no value. And so Porzingis right now, he's at an all-time low value during his tenure in Boston. Like, it's never been lower than it is in this moment. And so as much as that's when the fan calls begin for getting him out of here, that's usually not where, the trade value is going to be the highest. So maybe there's somebody out there that's like, I don't care that he was sick. I think that he can be the missing piece for us, and that doesn't matter. So it all comes down to the fact that there are 29 other teams in the NBA, and all it takes is one to believe in one of your guys, to maybe overinflate the value of somebody, whatever else it is. Everybody just saw that with Luka, right? Nobody would have thought that Luka would get traded, but all it took was one trade that lured Nico Harrison to do that. So I've already accepted that quite literally anything can happen. Nobody's untouchable. Maybe the only players that are untouchable are like LeBron and Steph Curry, and that's like more their legacy than anything. But maybe Jokic, maybe SGA at this point, I don't know. But it's really like we're in a very unprecedented era, and I think that this past season and Anthony Davis and Luka getting swapped, everything that went down, like it did kind of tell everybody like to be on their toes. And I remember talking to Jaylen Brown about it right after that trade, right before a game in Philadelphia, and I asked about it in the locker room, and he was like, I wasn't really surprised. Like, this is kind of just the nature of where the league is right now. So, yeah, so anything can happen. I will say that. Okay. Why is Porzingis playing in Latvia this summer when we still don't know what's wrong with him? I think because people assume that it's not a long-term concern, and that this was just kind of like the lingering effects of the virus, and that he wasn't able to get through it because of the fact that they were continuing to play day in and day out. If in August or July he's not able to go, then that changes things, right? So if he plays in Latvia, it's because he's able to play in Latvia. And if he's laboring in Latvia and he can't breathe, that would be very concerning and very surprising to me, because that seems a little bit like malpractice to continue that into the offseason and to not get an answer. It already was worrying me. Honestly, that was worrying me more than like general player injuries. And maybe that's just me, but you just see what happens to guys who are not healthy, and you don't want to risk his actual health, not just his physical health as far as injuries go. So I think that he'll be fine from everything we're hearing. There's no long-term concerns. The fact that he's planning on playing then, it means that he hasn't gotten any news that indicates that he shouldn't be able to play then. But if he's laboring and all of a sudden he's held 11 minutes and he was telling us after game 5 or game 6 that he could literally fall asleep on the floor and he had just played 11 minutes in that game and didn't do anything, right? So I think it's a good sign that he's planning on it. And Brad said he's happy that he is, and it'll probably help him get in shape. Porzingis himself said in the past he's had his best seasons off of when he played Eurobasket and he played overseas because he just kind of transitions right into the year. So I'm not overly concerned about it. Obviously, if he gets hurt, that sucks. But I think if anything, if he plays really well, maybe that helps kind of signal to other teams, potential trading partners, hey, this guy's actually ready to go. And what happened, what you saw in the playoffs was a kind of not a fluke thing, but all of that. So a lot of people here weighing in on timeline, a lot of crazy timelines. I'm seeing people say, I'm not expecting, look at the dichotomy of these two comments. I'm not expecting Tatum to be 100% until age 30, which is in 3 years, right? And somebody else here said 4 to 6 months. Tatum will be practicing full speed by the end of September. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. But yeah, we're all speculating here. We don't really know. We haven't heard from his medical professionals. His dad said 8 to 9 months. I don't know if his dad knows exactly what he's talking about or if he's just kind of saying what his gut feeling is. So we will see. But if nothing else, I think that the indicators are positive. We've only heard good things about this injury, about the surgery. I mean, about the situation around the injury. Obviously, the injury itself sucks. Okay, continuing to scroll down here. Brad didn't get into detail about draft plans with the 2 picks that they have this year. It's number 28 and number 32. It's possible that they want to bundle those up and move up a little bit in the draft. It's possible that they bundle them down. It's possible they trade them for an already in the NBA young talent. So I think everything is on the table. The number one thing that he did say about the draft is that when you're at 28 and 32, you're not exactly able to pinpoint exactly how that night's going to go. So they don't have like a player right now that they're going to draft because they have no idea how number 1 through 27 is going to look. Again, we will hear from him again on draft night back in this building. That's the next time I'll be here. So it's a little over a month. When is actually the date of the draft? I'm not going to Google it because my computer might crash. But I think ultimately, I would guess they need a center. Like, it does feel like they really need a center. I think that they have, as it currently stands, they have 3 really promising guards. Another young guard, J.D. Davison, who they did sign this year, so there is some hope or promise that he might be a part of the team moving forward. But he is on a non-guaranteed deal for a non-guaranteed second year of his contract, so he might not be back next year. But as far as the center position goes, Luke Cornett, Al Horford are both free agents. I think both of them might command more money than the Celtics can pay. I personally would love to see both of those guys back in Boston, and I'm sure everybody else on the team would as well. They're both been kind of hailed as these great teammates. But I think that they're going to want some backup insurance at the center position. So if I had to guess, that's going to be the archetype, but he did not get into specifics, and I think it's because there is just so much uncertainty. Like, who knows if they even have those picks. Okay. Continuing to scroll down here and kind of read your comments and questions. Thank you, Ma. Don't forget to hit the like button. You can subscribe to the show on You Got Boston podcast. You can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, leave a like, a review. It all really helps. There's a million Celtics podcasts, so if you like this one, it really helps to show the love anywhere. And I'll be doing these, as I said, anytime there's like new free agency signings, breaking news, medical updates, like we'll do reaction podcasts. And then also just during slow periods, I'll just come on here and just talk about kind of what we're hearing, what I'm hearing, and talking to people and all that. And I'll be at Summer League. So I'll be at Summer League for the full 10 days. And so we'll probably get a lot of stuff on the young guys from there. And then I'll just acknowledge this. Brad said there was 2 draft workouts today. I think people might have seen the report that Cooper Flagg and the Celtics have had a conversation. Like, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. That just means that Celtics want to have a good relationship with all of those top guys, especially a guy like him, a generational talent. Maybe down the road they trade for him, or maybe down the road he's a free agent and he wants to come back to New England. Like, who knows? And so you just want to have that touch point. But Dallas is not trading that pick. He's not coming to Boston anytime soon. But that's just, they do their due diligence. And normally that stuff doesn't get reported. But when something does get reported and then aggregated and all that, then it becomes a massive news story. So where do you think this team is trending? Are we trending a year where it's kind of a gap year? Do we still have a contending roster? This is the $1 million question, ROC. So this is the $1 million question. I don't think we got an answer to that today. And I want to answer your question in full, I'll be honest that I actually don't know. I think it could be either one. Like, I'm pretty 50-50 on this. And the biggest factors at play are, is there a chance that Tatum comes back next year? If Tatum is projected to come back in like February or March, like if that's the, he did this procedure, he has the best medical care, whatever. If that's what they're thinking in a few months, I don't think they're going to view next year as a gap year. It's also possible that so the range for Tatum is like missing all of next year, plus maybe potentially into the following year, to coming back mid next season. Like, that's a big range. The range for Jaylen is that in a month he healed and he spent a few weeks just off his leg, and that's great, or he's having a full meniscus repair and he misses the first 2 months of the season. So those two things, as much as I don't want this to be a cop out, but those two guys and their like still pretty undefined health status is the number one predictor of that question. If it's all of a sudden like Tatum's definitely out next year and Brown is going to miss a big portion of the year, I do think they view next year as more of a gap year, and they are more likely to kind of sell one of their great players. If it's like actually both of those injuries are not as severe, or I mean they are, Achilles rupture severe, but there is actually potential that in next April when they're heading into the playoffs, Jaylen and Jayson are both available. Like, that is a possibility, right? It's not the most likely one, but it's a possibility. I don't think they view next year as a gap year, and they're going to try to figure that out. I think there's going to be a lot of conversations around their medical status, and kind of that's going to be a determinant of where things are going to go from here. But that's going to be the number one indicator. I have a lot of faith that if you were able to keep Derek, Drew, Pritchard, if you can get Al back on a minimum, like I still think you can have like a playoff team, because I have a ton of maybe too much belief, and people can call me a green teamer or a homer or whatever else it is. Like, that's fine. But I think I've been on record for saying I think Pritchard has another leap that he can get to. I didn't think that it was going to be in Boston. I think that he has the potential to even like be a near all-star, if not an all-star player. But maybe the next year is the year that he has the opportunity to show that, and maybe he totally flops and I have a bad take, or maybe he steps into that role. And so I do think that the Jays' health is going to be the number one indicator. But from there, we'll get a better sense and kind of what they're thinking. So, okay. Or maybe you tank for a year. And again, I just want to acknowledge the three teams that have the top 3 picks right now are the 76ers, the Mavericks, and the Spurs. None of those teams enter the season tanking. They didn't, right? The Dallas Mavericks were hoping to win the championship. The 76ers were hoping to win the championship, and the Spurs were hoping to take a massive leap with Wemby, and they traded for De'Aaron Fox, and they wanted to make the playoffs. So those 3 teams ended up becoming the top 3 teams in the lottery. And so that is why I'm against just like flat out tanking, especially when you have so much talent and you have young stars still. Because you can try to tank the way that the Jazz and the Wizards and all these bad teams, the Hornets did, and they didn't even get top 3 picks. And so to me, it's like, try your best, try to win as many games as possible. And, if Brad gets a directive from ownership to shed $20 million in salary or shed $40 million in salary, then he has to do that. And that sucks, but he has to do it, right? So that's what we don't know. And he didn't talk about that today. But to me, it's like, put the best team possible. And if it's in the middle of the year and your team's losing and things did not pan out as expected, start tanking then. 76ers started tanking midway through the year. Mavericks started tanking midway through the year, and everybody got hurt. So I just don't think the Boston Celtics, 1 year out of a championship with the amount of talent they have still in their roster, and Brad emphasized the amount of talent they have, should start tanking at this point. Like, that's a wild prospect to me. And I've seen people say, like, tank for AJ, like, you have whatever, but I think that you have too much talent on the team. Gonna do a few more minutes here, and I'm actually gonna do a show on Bleacher Report at 5 o'clock, so you can tune into that as well. But what are your predictions with Al Horford? Al was, to me, a no-brainer that he was not going to retire before this loss. I was pretty much banking on him coming back. I think this loss really impacted him. He was pretty demoralized at the podium when he did his exit interview on Saturday. By far, I thought the most down of any of the players who spoke across, even the game's players that spoke right after the game and the players that spoke the day after. So my prediction with Al is that he takes a little bit of time, talks to his wife and kids, like he said, and kind of consults with his family. I still think he plays at too high of a level to retire, and he loves playing this game. And when I spoke with his mom earlier this season for a story I was working on, she said, he has a few years left for sure. And like, he's not near retirement. And I think that the numbers is offensive production. He shot 40% from 3 in the playoffs, for God's sake. Like, this guy did not have a massive drop off. Defensively, he was targeted more than anybody and held up well defensively. So Is the load on Al too much? Yes. Should they be relying on him for 38 minutes a night the way that the last two playoff runs they've needed him in big doses because the other centers weren't available, and particularly Kristaps? Yes. But I still think that he's a really valuable role player. And I think that when it's all said and done, he will resign, but he's going to have to take less than he's worth. And so it comes down to like what his priorities are. Obviously, we've seen him take money before. Maybe now that he's made more money in his career, he's a very high paid player through his career. Maybe he decides to take less money, but also listen, you can't be mad at him if he wants to maximize his value. This is going to be his last contract probably. So, he's going to do what he feels like is right for his family and his kids. He has 5 kids, their futures and all that. So money is definitely not tight in the Horford family, but all of these guys are going to want to get paid what they're worth. And that's why you see Jaylen Brown get a supermax contract and Jrue Holiday sign a massive deal. Like, they're not taking pay cuts, right? So I think that if I had to guess right now, I think he's going to resign, but I'm not nearly as confident about it because of Tatum's injury, because I think that he wants to play for a contender ultimately. And if next year's roster is looking a little shakier than he envisioned, it's just less of a reason why you would take a pay cut, right? Okay. I'm scrolling through here. I see this. I'm probably going to not be able to get through all of these right now, but I do appreciate all the questions. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This is a different conversation than I thought we were going to be having in mid-May. I thought we were going to be previewing the conference finals, but life comes at you fast, and there's a lot of interesting things to monitor here. Do I agree that Tatum should not burst back? I think Tatum should come back when he's ready. And if he's ready sooner than people expect, then there's no reason to wait, because it's going to take a while for his mental to kind of get up to speed. Like, that's the biggest thing that I've heard from Achilles injuries, is that physically maybe you're able to come back and be ready, but mentally there's a hurdle for players. And so maybe next year he comes back towards the end of the year, plays a little bit. Maybe they don't even make the playoffs. Maybe they do, and he plays for a couple rounds and he's on his best self. So long as that doesn't compromise his future ability to play, like, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. They're not going to rush him back before he's ready to go. Like, they're not going to compromise his career for a few extra months of basketball. So I think if you rush someone back too soon, from what I've learned, you do increase your chances of an Achilles rupture, but they're not going to do that. So I would be very surprised. Okay. Let me see if there are any more questions I should answer here. I might just wrap. I do appreciate everybody for answering all these questions. I think there was some stuff about Joe earlier. I will just say Brad made clear that he felt like the series was lost in games 1 and 2, which is also what everybody said after when they spoke. Especially the guys that spoke the day after, Jrue Holiday, Al Horford, they basically were like, we lost this in games 1 and 2. We blew those 2 games. Like, I'm confident to say they choked those 2 games. I don't like using that term, but that's like literally what we saw. It was like game 2 was one of the most shocking environments I've ever been in. I could not believe that we were watching a repeat of the same calamity from game 1. So Brad echoed that. He said there wasn't a fundamental problem with our roster, a fundamental this person's fault or this happened or we were unlucky. Like, they blew those 2 games. And so is that a little bit of a shot at Joe? I saw some people asking that. I mean, Joe's the guy managing the game, but he also said that Joe's great and that they're very lucky to have him. They said, we're lucky that we have Joe here. We're lucky that we have the staff that we have, and we're very thankful. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of uncertainty. I have way more questions than answers from this press conference, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of my initial thoughts, my initial takes. You can watch Brad's full press conference on CLNS Media. You can watch all the exit interviews on CLNS Media. We had Kristaps, Jaylen, and Derek all spoke after the game. The next day, we heard from Jrue Holiday, Al Horford, Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard, Luke Cornett. So pretty much everybody in the rotation spoke after elimination, which it doesn't happen every year, so I was grateful for that. So you can watch those full press conferences. We can do more. We're going to do more breakdowns, more analysis this offseason. Probably have another show in the next couple of days here. But as always, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Sorry if I couldn't get to your question. If anybody has like a desperate question, you can message me on Twitter, and I always respond. Or at least I try to respond. So you can message me there, and I'll try to answer your question as well. Or actually, even better, scratch that. Don't message me on Twitter. Comment on this video, and I will respond in the comment section, because I actually might not respond on Twitter. But comment in the comment section, and I will respond to that. And then I'll hopefully get your question if I didn't get to it on the live show. Thank you, as always. I'll have more stuff on Celtics blog, some written coverage, some written work. I'm excited for the offseason. I wish it didn't come so soon, but I think this will be an interesting one, and hopefully everybody enjoys the ride. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the NBA playoffs, which begin again tomorrow.